Welcome. Thank you for turning up on a Friday lunch when your choice is to be outside. Gosh, where to start? Me. So I do work with really large companies around the world on a variety of things around disruption and innovation and the future and organizational change. I live in Silicon Valley, so I have one foot, I live in the same postcode as Google, and yet I spend most of my time not there. I think I did like 500,000 kilometers last year, and I was in Australia about 5 times last year. I lived here 1.5 times. You have to figure out what the halftime meant. I won the Melbourne Cup in '97, Night and Power. Do you remember that? If you're in the exchange that night in Balmain, I was the one that bought you your beer. And I'm going to try, let's see, I guess a good speaker should entertain, amuse, and shock. And I'm going for the trifecta. All right, so judge me on those 3. So whilst I live in Silicon Valley, I'm abroad a lot. No slides, too corporate. Let's start with shock. So Silicon Valley, I don't think anymore is the high-tech capital of the world, right? Your mindset is that's what it does. It built a technology stack, yada yada. That model was an arms merchant, right? Larry Ellison has sold every bank in Australia, some Oracle stuff, and he has a lot of nice sailboats, but he's effectively an arms merchant. And if you look at Silicon Valley now, it's the industry disruption capital of the world. And instead of being an arms merchant, it's now a mercenary. And if you think of how a mercenary operates, what it does is it fields a professional army and gives them the best weapons and puts them on the battlefield and says, take land, take market share. And that's what it's doing now. So if you think about, probably started with iTunes. You know, when Steve Jobs came up with iTunes already a decade ago, he didn't rock up to EMI Music and say, hey, would you like to buy my music database? That would have been the old model, right? But the new model is he put it on the battlefield and crushed the music industry as we now know it, right? Started out with what the tagline was 10,000 songs in your pocket or something, and we already had Sony and others, and right, the Walkman, I think it was, and the little Rio device, whatever. But what's become really interesting for us now, take these companies. So, and when I say these companies are now in the industry disruption capital of the world, Apple Pay, right? It's in financial services now. Twitter's a media company, right? We heard of Osama bin Laden's death, not on Sky, or we didn't read about it in Sydney Morning Herald. We did the next day, but the news broke on Twitter, not on CNN, right? Somebody, oh, there's helicopters over my head, they're never here. Guns. Google delivers groceries to my house every day. Google's a retailer. I don't know if Kohl's or Woolies or West Farmers is, I'm sure, I hope they're aware, but what happens when they roll out here? They literally deliver groceries to my house every day. Google Shopping Express. Brilliant, just get your phone and they're very clever the way they do it. But what's interesting is take all these companies and put them in a bucket and just rattle off. You've heard the names, right? It's Apple, it's Facebook, it's Google, it's Twitter, it's Airbnb, it's Uber, it's Tesla, it's PayPal. I have slides. I'll give them to Soren. You can distribute these slides if you want them later. But if you look at this bucket of companies, they're about 13.5 years young, and they've created about 110 billion per company in shareholder value. Which I think is pretty interesting. Right? They're really truly exhibiting high growth. And if you boil down what they're doing, my assertion is that they're acting extraordinarily different than incumbents, than the AXS listed companies here, right? You may have seen a year and a half ago, Ian Narv at Combank said, I don't worry about NAB, Westpac, or ANZ anymore, I worry about Google and Apple. I'd like to think that had something to do with our conversation the week prior. Mike Smith at ANZ said the same thing. He went to Silicon Valley. He says, the pace of disruption in fintech is, I think he used the word horrifying. That was in the Fin Review about a year ago now. But what all this rattle off some of these characteristics, but I think what these companies are doing is they're practicing a set of, I call it a playbook, an organizational playbook, but they're running plays on incumbent businesses that I'm not sure the incumbent businesses are even aware of, and that's what's explaining their growth, and that's how they're getting ahead. So in no particular order, I'm going to start with one around open innovation. And what Soren's doing here, and the Florence Guild model of different people in different aspects, I think is exactly what we're seeing in Silicon Valley. That I see traditional incumbent companies close ranks up on the top floor of the building, they hire McKinsey, Bain, or BCG, and they try to figure out strategy, but they're doing it in a very closed vacuum. And I see the Googles, the Apples, the Twitters, the Facebooks of the world largely being much more open, practicing open innovation, right? All the world's smart people don't work for you. And so they're getting out there and they're putting their ideas in a marketplace, and that's very hard to do as an incumbent, right? You got this proprietary knowledge, you got to put a lock around it, you can't share anything. That model's dead. That model doesn't get companies ahead anymore. And so open innovation is this, actually a Harvard business professor, Cheeseborough, first said the word probably 15 years ago. But they're really, I think, practicing this in spades. Now there is an exception to the rule, and that's Apple. They're still pretty closed. They can see around corners. I mean, they're an unusual company, very unusual in that regard. But these other companies largely are practicing a form of open innovation. Another one we observe is they are relentlessly focused on growth. Okay, that sounds pretty obvious, Mark. But from the top to the bottom of the company, everyone knows how that company grows and what the growth metric is and how it works, and they can articulate it in pretty powerful ways. So if you think about it, capital markets, I mean, they work on growth. It's real simple. Whether it's a small startup that's trying to raise their first $100,000, or it's the world's largest company, you put $1 in, and at some future date you want a couple bucks out. The only way that works is with growth, period. The startup and the big company are doing the same thing. You got to grow. And these companies, these Valley companies, have really figured out how to embed that philosophy top to bottom. Educate, amuse, shock. Shock. Ageism, under 35s. We know the stories. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Michael Dell. They're 19, they quit uni, they create billions of dollars of shareholder value. White American males. It's another joke. But when you look at world history, you actually see Charles Darwin was 28 when he came up with the theory of natural selection. And Leonardo da Vinci was 26 when he came up with the first self-propelled machine. With Einstein was theory of relativity. Da Vinci was 23, self-propelled machine. Alexander Graham Bell was 18 when he started hitting his first big patent innovations. And Louis Braille was 15 when he came up with the Braille system, you know, the bump bits. He was born sighted, and at 4 he went blind because his father was a blacksmith and something blew up in the kiln. But I juxtapose that against these large companies, the large corporates, right? And their age-based pyramids. Get on the bottom of the ladder, climb up. After 30 years, you get the clock. Has anybody got the clock yet? Come on. Come on. Is anybody going for the clock? Come on. But, right, so you look, why you read TechCrunch, you read these tech journals. Why are they writing 25, 30, $40 million checks on a 25, 30-year-old consistently? You look at the so-called unicorn list, these unicorns of these high-growth startups that are worth $1 billion. We took the top 20 last week, we analyzed it, and the average age at inception of these companies, the average age of the founders was 28. I'll show you the math if you want it. Anything I say, hold it against me, I'll cite it, send me an email, whatever. But now, again, you put that on the corporate structure, 28 years old, 30 years old, they're buried deep in the organization, they're keeping their nose clean, they're climbing the ladder, they're playing it safe. All the research says the older we get, the more risk adverse we get. Look up the research. So I think there's probably 10 reasons why these under 35s are cracking it out of the park, if I can use the baseball analogy, right? They have something to prove, they have nothing to lose, they don't know what they don't know, they've been more recently skilled. You ask me to code, it's going to be in COBOL. They haven't been corporately formatted yet. Neuroscientists will say your peak cognitive age is between 24 and 31. Whoa, look that up. So I think all of these reasons also contribute to the idea that this thing called Silicon Valley, these people called venture capitalists, are placing a lot of small bets on these under 35s. And yet, in the large incumbents, they're ghosts, they're unheard of, right? Who's going to go to Ian Narv and say, hey, I need, some chirpy 28-year-old right out of UTS, hey, I need $20 million. Why? Because I'm going to go, crash into that existing business and probably screw it up, and the chance of returning capital is about 5%. It's never going to happen inside of a large AXS company, and it happens every day betting against that company. So I find this really kind of odd. You said it, Soren. This is a conversation, not a presentation. So the moment you want to jump up and debate, let's please do it. I see another one is I see big companies, they do pilots, and we've been doing pilots for decades in large companies. And we do pilots effectively to reduce risk. Don't want to screw it up, right? So we do a pilot. And then I look at these, these Valley disruptors, and they don't do pilots. They've never done a pilot, never heard the word pilot. They do experiments. See, the problem with a pilot is, it reduces risk, but it comes at a horrible cost, and that cost is time. Pilots actually slow down learning, right? If you've ever been in a big company, what do? We gotta do a pilot. Let's go trick that part of the business. We screwed something up there last year, so it's going to take a while to convince them to do it again, and it's going to take 6 months to agree what the pilot is, and it's going to take another 6 months to do it, and then that pilot may not work, so we got to do a second pilot, another part of the business. Shit, you're 2 years into it. The cycle times are so compressed in business that you don't have 2 years. And what I see these Valley companies doing is experiments. You heard the jargon, you heard the buzzword, you're all buzzword compliant, right? Fail fast, go forward, learn from failure. Forget that for a moment. Because the real issue is if I can do experiments, I can accelerate learning. The opposite of a pilot. And I don't see big companies doing any experiments. I see them doing pilots. And I see Google and Facebook and Twitter and Apple and all of the above doing experiments. They're learning faster. See, Jack Welch said it best. If the pace of change is outside is greater than the pace of change inside, you're going to hit a wall. I'm being polite. He said it a lot more aggressively. I think he used a 4-letter word. But if that change on the outside is greater than inside, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And it's hard to go into a large company lately and feel that excitement inside. Back to innovation theater, I guess. Let's put on our costumes and pretend. What else are we seeing?
Excuse me.
Yeah, please.
Could you just go into a bit more detail about pilots and experiments, maybe some actual examples of
Sure. So you get the idea that a pilot, we got to get a steering committee, got to terms of reference, we got to set the team up, go slow, we got document control numbers. I remember doing those things 20 years ago at Shell in The Hague. Painful. So an experiment just breaks down the problem into such small pieces that you're just continually learning. Google's working on a project called Loon. A lot of you have heard of it. They've just partnered with Telstra. And the idea is balloon-based wireless connectivity globally. Kind of a cool idea. They have a little problem though. There's no latitude anywhere around the world where there isn't a communist country that wants to shoot the balloons down. So they're not going to go all the way around yet. But they got that going with a series of small pilots. Bunch of geeks pulled out their credit cards, went to this little place called Fry's Electronics. We can build your own. It's like Dicks on steroids or something. It's just all this geeky stuff. And they bought a bunch of weather balloons. And the first experiment was, how far can it go up and stay up? Second experiment was, let's put a payload on it. The third experiment was, let's put a couple radios on it. Are they talking to each other? Fourth experiment was, let's fly them across New Zealand. That was actually the expensive experiment. Some remote rancher or farmer and sheep farmer in New Zealand, South Africa goes, hey, you got the internet. But they did a series of experiments that cost a couple £100, a couple $100, right? They did them on a weekend, put it on a charge card, they were done. And they had fun doing it. They didn't do a big on pilot. They still haven't figured, the detail out yet. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah? You just break down the problem into such tiny pieces that you're accelerating learning. But don't get caught into the time trap of pilots is the point. Because it's like death by 1,000 cuts. And the organizational inertia behind you will just kill it. Until you've washed out any innovation. See, big companies are built like they're super tankers, and you got we put KPIs on our business to the 4th decimal point because we got earnings per share every quarter to worry about, and we got to stay on track. And an innovation is the antithesis of that. You don't want to move the tanker.
So, Mark, are you saying that strategy is slowing big companies down, and that these
Conventional strategy is, the thinking that got them to where they're at isn't the same thinking that's going to get them out of the problem they're in and where they need to go. Yeah, strategy's part of the problem. And you outsource strategy to McKinsey. McKinsey, gets paid to tell you to keep giving them invoices, right? Right? McKinsey's not going to say, you hired us too much. Your problem is you're addicted to us. No? Your partner's going to take their $8 or $10 million a year out and knock yourselves out. That's great advice, isn't it? Wow, okay. Thanks. I think we need another study.